Thanks. On that cheery note, we clearly have a lot left to do to be helpful in Bosnia. It's really a pleasure to be here on this panel today. I've been working on issues in Bosnia and Herzegovina for almost 20 years now, starting after Dayton. So I've been back a number of times and have seen the changes and I've seen the things that have not changed. So these protests in particular, oh, can you not hear? Sorry. Okay. Sure. It's on. I usually speak quite loudly, so try not to get too close. So I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen the challenges that are there and the opportunities, and this is why USAID has remained engaged through this time. We've spent about $1.6 billion since 1996 on assistance programs in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So in the conversations that we've had after these protests began, as my colleagues have talked about, the protesters themselves spoke mostly of social and economic issues and of problems with an unaccountable and corrupt government. And these are the elements of programs that USAID has been working on since 1996. The U.S. Embassy was quite outspoken after the protests began and expressed support for the people and the fact that the government had to be held accountable for their concerns and that there needed to be a two-way dialogue. Das Lee was just out there, Hui Yi was just out there, and he said that if the government didn't listen to the population, their successors would. And I think that's a very strong statement that in our mind's eye, this has to be a dialogue that happens effectively. So as my colleague was talking about the plenums, these are the areas that I have been really excited about seeing civil society come together as actors to advocate for the changes they want to see. And this is the gap that USAID is looking to fill and looking to address, because a lot of these issues are ones that we've heard from our programs over the years with civil society as they try to advocate to the government for these reforms. And so these are the areas, and these are the type of groups that will be dialoguing that we would like to have more discussion with. On a whole, the most direct results of the protests really were the dismissal of these 4 cantonal governments in 2 short days. We have seen, as Janusz was talking about, what we have seen in Ukraine and other places, when you have a carrot out there or even a stick, you find a lot of movement in a few days. And so what we're probably going to see in the pre-election period is government officials being held a bit more accountable to the population. And that's the type of reaction we want to see. We don't like the violence, obviously. This is not the best way forward, but their voices are starting to be heard, and this is where USAID intends to plug in to make sure that it's done in a as peaceful a way as possible. We've got our 2 main programs, which I can talk about more in a Q&A session, but the Civil Society Sustainability Program that we've worked on for a number of years and will be working on through 2016, I believe, is directly for that. It's to have this engagement at the right level to make sure that we can do sub-grants to local organizations, so we're not taking U.S. implementers who come in and say, this is how you do it, because there is no roadmap for how you address protests in the streets. We've seen everything from the Arab Spring to, from the Velvet Revolution to the Arab Spring to what's happening in Ukraine. We don't know the best way forward. Only the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina know the best way forward. And we want to be responsive to that. So our input will be specifically in addressing that through sub-grants. The accountability project that we work on, it's called ACCOUNT, and I always forget what the acronym is. So anti-corruption, civic organization, unified network. I don't know. Anyway, it's ACCOUNT. But one of the intentions of that is to take the media and civil society and have them linked together to have more advocacy power towards talking to the government. And so those are the areas that the plenums will plug into, that we look forward to making sure we bring the protests that were on the street into a more cohesive and critical space where they can actually get movement forward. As Janusz was talking a bit about the EU, it's also been hard because we do take our cues from the EU in many respects. And Stefan Füle had slightly mixed messages when he came out, and they were not effective in being able to address the pending case that had been out there. Yet he did say there's still a roadmap to get into the EU. So we're trying to make sure that all of our programs work towards EU integration, Not necessarily accession, but EU integration, because we think that is the neighborhood, and that's where the international community can be most helpful.
Feel comfortable?
Sure.
It's right up your alley.
Yeah, I decided not to talk about fomenting revolutions. That seems like a good way to get myself in trouble.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. I actually have a question for all of you who follow Bosnia. And as we talk about civil society and we talk about the people who are out in the street, I wonder, we've not talked about the elections. Is there a reason why this can't be solved through, not necessarily solved, but this cannot be addressed through the upcoming elections? Why is, we can have civil unrest or, as you said, collective, nervous breakdown for a long period of time. During this pre-election period, there's actually a time to make changes and make change. And
some have described the violent protests we witnessed in Bosnia and Herzegovina between the 4th and the 7th of February as a collective nervous breakdown. This description would seem to suggest that the behavior on display over those 3 days was somehow irrational. I disagree. Those who make peaceful change impossible make violent revolution inevitable. Kennedy had the right of it. What few could have expected, however, though many had hoped for, including myself, was that this initial burst of militancy would be redirected into more useful forms of organizing. Okay? And so the people of Bosnia have said, we don't want violence. We don't want to do a Kiev. We don't want to be building catapults in the streets. Unfortunately, if they do not get the substantive support to move forward with this process, we are actually going to end up with catapults in the street. Because I think you're absolutely right here. The age of the color revolutions is over. This is the political dynamic right now. And if people begin to understand that the only way that you make change is by going out into the streets and, if necessary, clashing with the police and occupy government offices, they will do that. And that is a completely rational, if ultimately unfortunate, decision.